If a person's birth rates are not intact, then your single child will not be able to manage all that wealth. A couple of slaps and 9 radicals will come and snatch the keys and the property right from under them. Mankind has made some very big mistakes by not respecting the woman who did or still does the household work. Even today, I see some children who get packaged foods bought directly from the shop downstairs for 10 to 15 rupees, put it straight into their bags, and that is exactly what they eat for breakfast. They have no idea what the consequences are. By calling women witches, they were told that you will not do the work of medicine, the kind that you naturally prepare in your own home. Using your rights over food, you will not do that. For this, women were burned. They were called witches. All of these things were done. What they call a witch hunt. So this entire narrative that a woman who works at home is considered non-working. There can be no greater foolishness than this. She is the one and only person who connects with all the family members individually and gives them her time from her own personal hours with 100% of her attention. In fact, before the invaders ever came, Bharatiya women were considered among the richest business tycoons in the entire world. I am talking about the masses. I'm not talking about 1 or 2 women. That is why you will not find any specific names. So human civilization, as you know, is what we call nomadic tribes. They are traveling from here to there, transporting things and just making a living for themselves. Now, the starting point of women's empowerment was actually the point where a shift from polygamy to monogamy happened in human behavior. And this particular shift happened when agricultural land was discovered and it was realized that a consistent food supply could be obtained from it. So if we work on this land, then the food supply will remain consistent and we can build a family. So women's empowerment truly began with agricultural settlements. And it was from there that polygamy changed and human behavior moved towards monogamy. So you have this word, settlement. That is where the word settle for marriage comes from. When we repeatedly ask, have you settled down? Right? So it really should not be surprising at all, should it? That if the word settle started from there, from our core sector of agriculture, then the further and further we move away from that core sector, the more the divorce rates are increasing. This is just common logic. Because as you keep getting transferred again and again to unknown cities where absolutely no one around you recognizes you, your banker changes, your employer changes, your neighbor changes, and your relatives do not come and visit your home anymore. The ones who used to know you on a regular basis. In that same kind of environment, your behavior starts to become weird. And so monogamy then slowly begins to transform back into polygamy. So it is quite obvious that when you step outside of the core sector of settled agricultural communities, you are going to find much higher divorce rates. Now, what we really need to understand is that with the rise of commercialization, specifically from the 18th century industrialization, that is the factory-based industrialization, where you are getting 1,000 times more productivity, a place where it was understood that, well, women also have to be utilized as a unit of labor. Right, so up until that point in time, human civilization was a place where man was treated as a disposable commodity. I mean, with all the verbal abuse and insults he had to endure, he would manage it, he would tolerate all of it because he had to provide for the family back at home, right? In his role as a provider. Now, gradually changes began to appear, suggesting that now women will also become a unit of labor. Because factories are only concerned with their own profits. They have absolutely no concern for who is going to teach values to the next generation. They have no connection with that whatsoever. Okay. So when we hear that Elon Musk is repeatedly expressing his concern that the birth rate in the West is declining, President Putin introduces certain schemes in Russia concerning the birth rates. Schemes are introduced in Italy. China and Japan are also showing the very same concern regarding their birth rates. So, as soon as you start to use women during their most fertile years as a unit of labor, once you deploy them in that way, your birth rates are definitely going to go down. This is precisely the format of that one life consumption model of Abrahamic economics. Now, this entire process of industrialization that took place, the manner in which the workers were exploited during it, within that 18th century industrialization, that is where the women's liberation movement originated. I mean, it did not originate in Bharat. The women's liberation movement started from the West. Okay? And because there has been exploitation, liberation is bound to be demanded. So when this particular type of exploitation of women happened in the workplace, and there was another important sector that women used to look after in ancient Western society and even here in Bharat, was the kitchen, which they mainly handled and which was always considered to be the very hub of your health. I mean, if you are eating correctly, then you do not really need any medicine. In fact, if there is some kind of problem or some illness, then its medicine is found in your food and its solution can also be derived from it. Okay? So, the mischief they carried out in the West was this, that they declared that medicine is something that only men will practice. Because it was these very mothers and sisters who were making all the medicines in the kitchen for all sorts of minor illnesses. So, in order to establish the pharmaceutical industry in the West, women were branded as witches and they were burned and killed. I am repeating it. Understand where the women's liberation movement began. This movement started in the West. So, where did this opposition to men even begin? It all started when, back in the West, to establish the pharmaceutical industry, women were branded as witches and told, you will not do the work of medicine. The remedies you create naturally at home using herbs and food, you cannot do that. For this, women were burned, called witches. All this was done. What we call a witch hunt. And this was part of the conversion process that also ran in the West, moving people towards Christianity. So this is where the opposition to men began, because it was declared that from now on, only men would practice medicine. And from that point, the pharma industry originated, which is an entirely profit-based model. You know it, and I know it, that the more your kitchen and my kitchen remain shut down, the more medicines we will have to take. So this entire food processing industry and the pharmaceutical industry, in order to bring both of them into existence, women were deployed as a unit of labor, and it was promoted that they too should be brought into the job model. Now, you have that same British classroom format where what they call slaves, the slave trade that they used to conduct, where they were showcased one by one in a slave market and then subsequently sold off. The British turned that very system into the classroom format, a glorified, organized format for slavery, a system where parents themselves sponsor the process of slavery by paying the fees, right? And so began the human trafficking from classrooms to jobs. Because after being imprisoned within four walls for 15 to 20 years, such a useless product emerges that he cannot do any entrepreneurship at all. That was the objective. And to make the parents themselves the sponsors by having them pay the fees. Right? He will graduate, have a party, and the very next day he has no idea why he should even get up. So this model was established along with the pound as a single country's reserve currency. That classroom model, now, when it comes to going from one job to another, you see, for any normal human being, living a life that is constantly under someone else's control is simply not a natural tendency. It is not for anyone. So the economics of the entire ancient world was created in just the last 400 years and presented as a job as an empowerment model. Before that, the entire family unit entrepreneurship model was running, where women equally participated and even led businesses. In fact, you will find that before the invaders came, the women of Bharat were considered among the world's richest business tycoons. I am talking about the masses. I am not talking about one or two women. That is why you will not find any names of who the business tycoons were. You will not find one or two brands from ancient Bharat either. Oh, was that brand a big name? No. You will not find them because the masses, all of them were into entrepreneurship. And they were so rich that they gave 27% on an average to the world GDP for 1800 years. The masses were that rich. So in order to break this model, there was the imposition of English and the imposition of the classroom format, and the classroom to job model was established with the pound set as a single country's reserve currency. And it is a very natural and obvious thing that if you are going to be under someone's control for 10 hours, which is something that is simply not natural for the human body. So when you finally get out of those 10 hours, your behavior is going to be so bad because now you have to test out your freedom. So the way a man behaved after getting out of his job, after he came from the office, after coming home, and also the way that same man behaved before going to the office, that was then labeled as empowerment. That very misbehavior was presented to women as if to say, this is what they call empowerment. Becoming even more attracted to that, women were also pushed forward into jobs. So the intent of bringing co-education into the classroom was not to give some kind of equality to both. This was the actual intent, that for the companies, both are simply units of labor. You can insult a woman just as much as you can insult a man. That was the real intent. So this entire model that was created, in it, the more and more the exploitation increases, the more and more the narrative that women need to have equal rights will also grow, because exploitation is just inevitable. Now you will not find a single man who works a job all day long who will say that it is empowerment. But in women's empowerment, whatever narrative you happen to read, whether it is in advertisements or campaigns, on the screen or in newspaper articles, everywhere you will only see things written about the working woman. Now, anywhere you look in women's empowerment, anything, if you pick up any piece of literature, it only and only talks about the woman who has a job. It never ever talks about the homemaker woman. So a whole narrative is being created that the work a woman does at home should not even be considered as work, that she should be abused for it. And in this, I believe that the whole of society is also at fault. They did not give that level of respect to the work at home that we should have actually given to our grandmothers, our mothers, or whoever they may be. Neither did the economists give that weightage to a woman's contribution, that a woman who is raising 5, even 6 family members is grooming them and getting them ready to contribute to the nation's GDP. Her own contribution is not being mentioned anywhere at all. No credit is being given, and not even the basic respect that she should be receiving is given. In empowerment, you will only be told about jobs. It is never ever mentioned how important our grandmothers or our mothers who built the home actually are. That is something that will never be told. Take any literature on women's empowerment. It is because all these companies are sponsored and they believe in human trafficking from the classroom to job. All right? And it works the same way in the education format. For the last 15 to 20 years, these very same companies have already been taking a portion of your fees. The fees you paid, your parents, a portion of it is taken by these very companies that later come for campus placements 20 years later. Right, so you see, this is a whole nexus in which it is absolutely ensured that you are not left capable of any kind of entrepreneurship whatsoever. Secondly, every 3rd or 4th year, it is standard practice that you will be transferred to a completely new and unknown city. So why is this being done? Because if you settle down in a city and you have understood the environment all around you, and now by some mistake you have started some kind of entrepreneurship. So it is a standard in the corporate world that every third or fourth year you have to be picked up and thrown into an unknown city. This is so that stability never comes, so that you can never understand the market. So this entire job model, the one life concept, Abrahamic economics, which comes from the religions that believe in one life, this entire system of economics runs from the very origin of that particular thought process. So it is not just that in the narrative of women's empowerment, they are saying to send them to jobs. It is not just about that. You are told a parallel narrative runs that there is a lot of population, the country just cannot handle this much population, right? They run this narrative alongside it as well. This is because you have kept women busy with work during their most fertile years. So then the objective of automatically reducing the birth rate is also successfully achieved. Secondly, consider all these Western governments, especially when they have promoted this very thing. Their objective was that the government could also collect taxes from 50% of the population. If women also work, then you can take tax from their salary. So you see, all of these multiple vested interests came together and promoted this whole thing as empowerment. Today, you look at all those families in the West where they feel they have to buy a new mobile phone every 2 months. Yes, every 6 months they have to buy a new laptop. So where will they give birth from? How will you give birth? When your expense is going somewhere else, you're spending. So this is how all civilizations have ended. For example, the Roman civilization, where women engaged in extravagant spending. They were given extravagant liberty, and as a result, the birth rates were completely finished. And when your birth rates are finished, it automatically becomes an open invitation for radicals to come and take over your entire country. If the birth rates are gone, then open the borders. So this is the cycle. So it is very, very clear that the world's wealth ultimately goes into the hands of those who are reproducing. The money is ultimately going to go to those whose birth rates are intact, whether it goes through the government, whether they forcefully snatch it away, or you willingly give it to completely unknown people as inheritance. So it does not matter how much wealth you accumulate. If your birth rates are not intact, then your single child will not be able to manage all of that wealth. Nine radicals will come, slap him a couple of times, and snatch the property keys right from him. You need to get what is going on. And no politician is going to intervene because they just want votes. Vote bank politics just works like that, based on the number of voters. There is no emotion or ideology involved in it. The reality on voting day is simply who is actually going to the booth and how they are voting. That is the only thing that gets respect. It is as simple as that. Right? Then you will just keep crying that it is like this, or it should have been like that, but nothing like that ever happens. If the birth rates are not maintained, then it is all over. So that is exactly how wealth gets transferred from the family through inheritance. Now, this entire thing, from LGBTQ to the wave of feminism and all the other divisive tactics, it is not just that. There is a whole other industry, the pet industry. In Australia today, the situation is such that there are more dogs inside the house than there are family members. They have a whole entire nexus going on. A whole nexus is currently running on exactly how to replace family members with dogs and cats. For this, the necessary psychological influence is being spread all around, from social media to every other possible place. Kids are young, impressionable minds. They do not understand what is going on. But basically, this is the main objective. For the profits of the pet industry, family members are being replaced with dogs and cats inside the home. And these are not naturally born dogs and cats. These are specific breeds that have been professionally and forcefully bred. Okay? So these are all the threats to human civilization that we really need to understand. And all the people who say that kitchen work is worthless, or they give it a new spin of gender inequality. This is what is being talked about as gender inequality. This is not about gender equality, not in kitchen work or housework. Let me explain the logic behind this to you as well. Those women who say that men should also be doing that work, okay? You should go and ask those women, if you are going to have a job and you are going to hire a maid to manage the house. Are you going to hire a man, or are you going to hire a woman? Because if it is about gender inequality, you would hire a man, right? So these are all just fake reasons, claiming it is about gender inequality. It is not about gender inequality at all. The narrative that is being discussed here is that the work done at home is considered lower level work. This is the narrative that is going around. There is no talk of gender difference here. But those people will present this narrative in a way that makes it seem like gender difference matter. In fact, all the women who decide to outsource this work of managing the household, they outsource it to other women only. They do not hire any man for it. Okay. They get the work done by paying women themselves. So there is no question of any gender difference here at all. Okay. So, and secondly, it is about how incredibly important the kitchen is, because the people who are eating processed food, their bad health has a complete and direct linkage to it. There is a direct connection with them becoming a customer of the pharmaceutical industry. And this whole scam is running so deep, to the extent that the very same company that manufactures diabetes tablets is the exact same company that also works on crop science, specifically on the seeds of crops. Okay, and you can just imagine what kind of MOUs must exist between these companies, that whoever gets diabetes, they start having blood pressure after a few years. And whoever has blood pressure gets diabetes a few years later. Okay, so the people who say that kitchen work is useless, that it is pointless work, they have absolutely no idea that the entire health of all the members of the family is directly linked with the kind of food you are eating. So those people who look down upon household work, they should really start thinking about how much they are compromising. Even today, I still see some children who are buying packaged foods from a shop directly downstairs at their school for just 10 to 15 rupees. They buy it, put it in their bag, and eat that for breakfast. They have no idea what the consequences of this are. So the more and more that we, as a society, the economists have certainly made a mistake by not marking a woman's contribution anywhere. But as a society, men have made a very big mistake by not giving respect to the women who used to do, or who still do, the housework. And now they are suffering the consequences. So you have to understand just how important every single thing is. So this entire narrative that a woman who works at home is considered non-working, there can be no statement more foolish than this, because those a homemaking woman is the one and only individual from whose personal hours more than 5 family members are demanding her direct attention. Do you understand how important that role is? She is such a family member who not only keeps your cultural and your social structure completely intact for your entire civilization, she also keeps your dharmic activities intact. But she is the one and only person who connects with all the family members on an individual basis. And she gives her time out of her own personal hours, the kind that comes with 100% of her attention. And yet you call her non-working. So you should really start to using your brain a little bit more.